All right.
I have fun every time hearing that music. It's like it's elevator techno, right? Like EDM. I
They couldn't handle that in an elevator. If you put that in an elevator, you would have all sorts of traffic jams.
I was sitting here.
I
I have my practice pad right back here.
I was gonna ask you about that. Do you drum?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I've got
For how long?
since I've been 8.
Okay.
All right, if we have you back when I remember, you're gonna be on the spot.
Hey, I got 2 drum sets in the house. The electronic one's
Oh
upstairs.
yeah.
The acoustic one's next door. The djembe's in another room. Not this one, a real djembe. I've got the cajon, which is a box. That's
Oh
in a
yeah.
room somewhere. So I still do recording. It's fun.
Were you pro or against Rock Band when that whole thing came out?
I love rock, and I have a great time with it. You got to remember though, I've been around the block. I was a snare drummer at Florida State. I got a gig playing at Disney World for 3 years.
Oh wow.
So, I've been around the block with everything I do. It's a blast.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, let me tell you what, when you see Pooh Bear without a head first thing in the morning,
Whoa. Okay.
So
You have been around the block.
that's the fun part of music. I made the mistake of thinking it would be a fun business once, and I ran a music festival for a few years. And man, it's literally the worst industry I've ever worked in. And I've worked in a lot of industries at this point.
how do you think I never went pro?
It's horrible. It's
I don't
horrible.
think I was good enough to be a studio musician, but I definitely had some bands that had opportunities, and I went. What people don't realize though is if, as a drummer, right, if you're not in the band, and what I mean by that is like, Alex Van Halen is part of Van Halen, right? Tico Torres was part of Bon Jovi. If you're just Taylor Swift's drummer, you're only making 75 grand a year.
But you're probably having a really good time if you're Taylor Swift's drummer.
Yeah, probably. But at the same time, you're working that hard, making 75 grand a year and
Yeah,
always on the road. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where it's a blast, but dude, it's a workout under those lights. I lose
Yeah,
2
that's
pounds every time I play at a festival.
It's a blast if you're under 30.
Exactly.
All right, so intros, right? I'm Matt, CEO of Fort Mesa. We do cyber risk management, a little bit of vulnerability management. Who wants to go next?
My name is Zach, also Fort Mesa. Background in business management, people development. I owned a business where I contracted MSPs and worked with MSPs. So I kind of bring the other side of the table to the conversation there.
Cool. Hey, my name is Matthew Koenig. I'm the VP of Channel Sales at Nodeware. And for those of you that know me, for 20 years now, all I do is preach how to sell stuff, how to market stuff, and I am passionate about helping you sell more cybersecurity stuff. Been around the block forever, love all of you, and can't wait to have an opportunity to work with you.
Okay.
All right.
So now that we all know who we are, let's do our random control of the day. I think
Let's do it.
there's a button I forgot about. Here we go. So, log management. I think I don't know how many times I've had the log management conversation, but it doesn't matter what I'm selling in cyber. The conversation always comes back here because people confuse log management with everything else, right? Because there's SIMSOC SOAR, right? And all the spider web of things that are tied back to logs, right? And people say, isn't this log management? Doesn't that take care of log management? Didn't I do that thing? Like, didn't I buy that thing? And so we've got the CIS version of the control here, 8.1, and there is an 8.2.3.4, etc. For more advanced log management. But if we just look at this in its most basic form, it's a plan that an organization is collecting the logs, and that it's been formalized, and that we've thought about what we're logging and how long we want to keep those logs for, and how long we're going to reassess that change. When we look at the more advanced versions of this control, we're going to see things like making sure logging's turned on, right, on all the things, making sure that there's enough disk space on all of the things, right? And then the actually quite sophisticated versions are, and by the way, please take care of those basic things first. Make sure that someone's reading the logs, right? And to do that, you probably have to correlate them in a place, and then you have to be able to toss out the things that are normal and look for the anomalies. Um, and out of all of that comes, okay, then we're seeing the bad things, right? And what do we do about that? And that goes into incident response. But the other thing is really just having a record, a forensic record. If something bad happens, do you even have the capability to go back in time and figure out what was the impact? Where did this thing come from? What was impacted? Sometimes I see breaches and you see a statement from the company that says something like, "We have no evidence of any customer impact," right? And what they're saying is they didn't have logs turned on. They have no freaking idea how much data was lost. And that's never what you want to hear. I just- Matt, you want to share any log management thoughts here?
Only the fact that I love when I hear people say that. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. I'm like, see, that's the case where you might need SEAM or something like that. Because I don't know. I think even a medium-sized business nowadays, with as crazy as things need to have significant log management, just because of the fact that whether it be for cyber liability insurance or compliance frameworks, I mean, if you don't know what happened, you're going to get pinged somehow.
Absolutely. Matt, I've got a question for you related to this. So is there a software that can just like manage this process end to end, or does it take more than that?
Look, there's lots of vendors that will tell you yes. So there's some really great solutions there in the MSP space that bite off like the most important chunks of this. But the reality is, you cannot get away with just buying a thing. You do, as a service provider, you do have to do things, right? And in particular, like you might have like a sexy MDR product, right? That's really good at capturing those endpoint logs and then beaming them someplace where someone's threat hunting and like sending you back just the most egregious anomalies that are clearly incidents in progress, right? And that's great to have that stuff, and it's really important. But if you didn't turn logging on your like random firewall, like literally there's like a checkbox and you didn't click logs on, right? That's a huge failure. And so as an MSP, there is a process where you need to plan. You need to just go down and make sure logs are turned on everywhere.
And
And
logs on, you would say, is step number one for
step
anybody.
step one, and some things come out of the box with logs turned on and some things don't, and you have to turn them on. And some products can't effectively log at all, and that's a major problem. That's a thing that should go away, whatever that thing is.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is, remember that nowadays it's also a safety valve for the MSP, because I mean, at the end of the day, somebody gets breached or something happens and you can't even tell them how or why. The risk is now all on you to explain what happened.
Oh yeah, I mean it's if you're doing the right things as an MSP, and this is having proof of it's important. You're gonna be okay in that insurance arbitration or that lawsuit, right? Just follow the best practices. Bad things happen, but at the very least, you should be doing you should be doing the basics of best practices, and log management's part of that. And yeah, there's lots of, I could point to some log products, but none of them out of the box are going to take care of this. There's a human job here. I think with that, we're ready to jump into the topic of the day. So Matt, today's topic is vulnerability management. We're in the vulnerability management space. You guys are in the vulnerability management space. I think what are some of the things you think our audience, MSPs, need to know, or think they know, but maybe need a little bit more information?
Sure. first thing, they need to know that vulnerability management nowadays is required. It's not optional anymore. If you have any customer that's trying to meet any compliance framework, I mean, literally any one of them, or wants or has cyber liability insurance and you don't have vulnerability management, right there, you're done. You've just assumed all the risk for that customer because they're requiring it. What's interesting is seeing all the MSPs that confuse vulnerability management and EDR or vulnerability management and SOC or SIEM or whatever. I mean, the reality is, the way I always try to talk about it is, if you're someone who has heart disease in your family and it's been running there for a while and you go to the doctor sees, I'm seeing some markers here and there. Here's what I think you need to do. Okay, that's vulnerability management. You take their advice, you do everything you can to protect what you can and address those vulnerabilities. Or you can wait until you have the heart attack and then go ahead and deal with it at that point. And that is EDR. Now, I'm not saying you don't need both. You need both, because if something happens, you need to be able to address it. But vulnerability management is incredibly important. And, Nodeware's into it for the long haul, especially the way we go about it.
So I hear a lot people confusing vulnerability management with other things. There's confusing it with EDR, right? Or MDR, or whatever you want to call the endpoint product that's looking for indicators of compromise, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's also penetration testing, there's red teaming, there's inside vulnerability management versus outside vulnerability management, network scanning versus agent scanning versus like what's an authenticated scan. There's a lot of terminology here that's misunderstood, and it does matter. And some of these things are actually on the insurance forms.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know what some of these questions mean, I mean, you may think you know the answer, and then you get caught out in a claim, and all of a sudden, yeah, you're the bad guy who didn't do the thing or filled out the form wrong or told your customer to fill out the form wrong, right?
Well, then you also have customers that are filling out the forms without their MSPs.
Yeah.
I mean, I love that, one of the things I'm finding is MSPs more and more have not been involved in that process. They're not proactively saying, hey, do you have a cyber liability policy? Hey, do you want a cyber liability policy? And becoming involved in that and making sure that what the customer's checking off is true. Because as you just stated, you can check off anything you want, but when it comes time, if they find that wasn't correct, they're never paying out. And furthermore, the insurance companies now are going, oh, you want this? And if you're not bringing your MSP to the table, they're sending out their MSP into your account. I mean, that's not fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I've heard of it on 20 occasions where an insurance company has their own people they deal with, and they're sending them out because the other MSP didn't say anything or the customer didn't say anything.
So, clearly the MSP's got some responsibilities here. What is best practice right now? It's doing vulnerability management instead of not doing it, right? But can we get a little more specific? Like what are insurers and regulators expecting? This changes from year to year, right? But let's just talk about like quarter 2/23. What is best practice literally right now?
So best practice, and I'm not just plugging us, whether you use us or use someone else, all of these frameworks and insurance providers are moving to continuous vulnerability scanning, internal and external. And the reason for that is, most products right now, you have to get a box. You have to plan it on a night or weekend. You have to put the box scans, bring back the box. Now you're working off reports for the next 3 days, trying to put something together for the insurance or audit or even your customer. And that means if you're doing it quarterly, someone has had 90 days to penetrate that vulnerability and get in there and cause a problem. And the average time when someone gets into your network, I'm sure you guys know this is what you do, it's 212 days right now before they're ever caught. So with continuous vulnerability,
a long time.
What's that?
That's a long time.
Oh yeah, that's a long time, and they can do
really
lots of
long
havoc.
time.
And so what continuous vulnerability scanning does is it notifies you of all the vulnerabilities you have every 24 hours. So those critical alerts will pop up and you'll be able to jump on them immediately. hopefully before anybody has the chance to exploit them in any way, shape, or form. And it's constantly running and notifying you of those critical vulnerabilities as they happen. So you can imagine why insurance and compliance frameworks love this, because of the fact that there is no 30 days to get in there. There is no quarter to get in there. Boom. 24 hours old the information is.
Wait, let's back up a little bit. You talked about 200 days that an attacker could be in the network, but they're not like everywhere in the network for 200 days, right? They're like one place. And then what do we call this lateral movement, right, through the network? They have access to one thing, then they get access to something else, and then they escalate privilege, and then they do more lateral movement, right? And each of these times there's lateral movement, right, or privilege of escalation. Many of these points that they're moving through the network, they're taking advantage of vulnerabilities, right? So when you stop those vulnerabilities, or at least you use some kind of SLA to target, the really bad things, right? The really bad vectors. You're not necessarily keeping the attacker out of every system on the network, right? But you're isolating them, right? That's defense in depth, right? You're stopping them where they are. And yeah, they may be on that machine for 200 days undetected, but they're only on that machine 200 days, right? And they're not crawling around extracting stuff from everywhere. And that's critically important. And that's the reason why we do the continuous scanning. And it's everywhere, right? Not just the surface, because like a lot of people have been doing surface scans forever, right? Network scans, or they've been doing either their outside network surface, or they drop, like you said, a sensor on the network, and they just they shoot it across the network, but everything's got a firewall on, and they're like, oh, it looks clean, right? And so, but that's not enough, right? We need to get.
There's an importance to having, both a sensor to pull down the infrastructure, right? Because a lot of people skip that step. You're not scanning the routers, the switches, even the IoT devices for that matter anymore. Everybody kind of ignores those, but with our product, as a matter of fact, it pulls down everything that has an IP. And I think it's hysterical because you can eliminate things if you want to, but I've got an MSP somewhere in the Midwest that is scanning a customer's Roomba on a monthly basis. But I mean, technically though, if you want to think about it,
that's important data.
Well, that's awesome. I was hysterical.
You know where everything is in the person's house.
Side trip here. You guys know that like literal 3D maps of your house are uploaded to Amazon, right?
Oh yeah.
And it is scary.
Well, and it's funny because people think of it as it's no big deal, but you know what? Nest thermostats have been breached. I mean, if you have IP, you can get in. Now, what I always say is at least you should know what you don't know. Know that they exist, know where they are. What you choose to do with them is fine. But to your point, the way I always break it down to people, it's kind of like a hotel, right? With vulnerability scanning, right? You're looking across every floor and looking for something that's going on, something that could cause a problem. And let's say you get to the 6th floor and you see something that causes a problem. Well, now you're locking down the elevators and you're trying to lock all the other doors to make sure that can't go anywhere else, to your point, sideways or up or down or whatever. And that's the whole point of remediating those vulnerabilities on a regular basis, because at least now you're putting it in one spot. And hopefully by remediating that, you're killing it. You're done. It's over with. But if you're not remediating those vulnerabilities, as you said, this one on the list could be high. But if you get in the critical, now you have access to the high vulnerability, that you didn't remediate and everything. So it's an ongoing battle. But if you're not being proactive, then you're being reactive. But reactive a lot of times, 50% of the time is catastrophic.
So I'm we come from the compliance space, right? And the risk assessment space. And we, that's our value prop at Fort Mesa. But we relate to vulnerability management. We leverage a number of sources for vulnerability management. And what we do is we wrap that up into a risk model, and we try to come up with a way for MSPs to absorb the cost of this activity, right? This is a lot of work, right? Mm-hmm. You scan for vulnerabilities. That's sort of like step one, right? And then you have to do something about it. And sometimes you look at sometimes I look at an MSP and they're like showing me their data and I'm like, wow, that's really clean. Like you must like polish your floors, right? And then you look at like another client, it's like, yeah, I know you only scan 10 machines, but yeah, you also have 10,000 vulnerabilities. So
we had one of those really clean ones this week.
We have an unpatched Windows 19 server that we use for demo purposes.
Yeah.
It's firewall 900 feet deep. It's got 2,900 vulnerabilities on it.
Yeah, but we did have a provider. Was it yesterday, Zach? We're looking at the data.
Yeah.
The guy has one vulnerability. I'm
Yep.
like,
Yeah.
huh? What are you doing right?
And you were like, let me make sure everything's okay. You know, and we troubleshot everything, and it's just like, wow, man, you're doing a nice job over there. Way to go.
Yeah. So that's not usually the case. Even if you're running patch management, right? You got a patch management product. There's like just tons of stuff that's not patchable, right? Like patch management's not enough. You also have to scan for what patch management's missing, and then of course patch management breaks sometimes, or patch management doesn't work with vendor A. So you come up with all this data, right? But it can be a lot of work to clean all of that up. So the way we communicate with our customers is, I got it right here, right? This is in the sales playbook, right? Set an SLA with your customer. The SLA represents how much risk are they accepting in their environment, right? And more risk acceptance actually makes, that is the customer's accepting risk of vulnerabilities in their environment. If there's more risk acceptance, the cost of remediation is lower, right? Less risk acceptance, the human cost of remediation is higher.
Yep.
So we've got a lot of methodology around that, but I'm curious, what's your guidance for MSPs that think they've been doing vulnerability management for a long time, but they haven't been doing the remediation work because the cost model is something that they haven't figured out how to make money on this, right?
Yeah. Well, one of the first things is, before I forget, because I didn't say this before, you also have to have agents, because so many remote devices exist nowadays. If you're not blowing an agent out to a remote device, I'm a perfect example. I'm always on the road. You know this. I'm at every show under the sun, but I'm at airports and hotels. I'm the one you want to scan. So with an agent, at least, as soon as I connect to the internet, right, boom, my machine's scanning the information coming back.
Yeah, and we recommend that you start as an MSP. That's layer one defense is agents, right? Like a few steps later is, okay, you should probably scan the rest of the network. But that doesn't even always fit into an SLA, because the customer may say, well, I don't want to pay you to fix like the whatever machine that is some other vendor. And if that's the case, like, you have to figure out if there's a revenue model for chasing down intelligence no one's going to do anything with, right?
Yep. And to your point, I mean, here's the guidance we always give, right? You're going to get lots of vulnerabilities unless you're doing, as you said, an amazing job and it's a smaller environment. I love the whole thing when somebody comes back to me, we have 20 assets, and then they go scan, we have 120 because it finds stuff they never realized they had. But at the same time, our guidance says, look, you're going to get, especially the first time you do it, you're going to get a lot of vulnerabilities. Focus on the critical ones. Focus just on the critical ones to start with. Don't not saying the other ones aren't important, but critical vulnerabilities are defined as this has been exploited somewhere. Maybe not in your network, but somewhere in the world, this has already been exploited. Fix those first. Then start with the highs, right? And create a plan, right? It may take 6 months to get through all the highs, and that's okay, because it's still better than doing nothing.
I got to show this comment, guys. This is our user with the one vulnerability. I think he's got his privacy settings up, so I can't confirm that.
If I could throw out a low-level question for those MSPs that are maybe not active in the vulnerability management space yet, because we're throwing out some words that I think people get confused kind of often in the space. So we've got vulnerabilities, then we've got an exploit, and we've got threats. And those are three things in the space that all play together, are different things. And I think a lot of the times they get confused. So I would love for one of our two experts to kick that back and forth a little bit.
I've got a I've got a diagram I'm going to track down. So Matt, you go first while I
Well, a vulnerability is it could happen, right? A vulnerability is my wife walking in the room and saying, if you do that again, then I'm doing this. That's a vulnerability. But an exploit,
it's possible.
right?
It's just possible.
She walked out the door and now I'm chasing. I use the most obtuse examples, but people usually get them. That I did it, but now I'm running out the door, chasing it down and trying to fix the problem, right? It's happened somewhere. It may not happen in their house over there, but it's happened here. And a threat is just the plain and simple knowledge that there's something out there that may become a problem, and understanding that it at least exists so you can be on the lookout for it. Because even though it's not showing up on your radar yet, doesn't mean it's not going to show up on your radar tomorrow. So that's more of a knowledge thing, and again, I see MSPs get overwhelmed constantly. And to Matthew's point, how do you pay for it? Well, you don't. Okay. And what I mean by that is it's because there are certain things that are a part of your security stack. You don't try to sell them. The reason why is you can't sell them. There's no way. If you try to explain what Fort Mesa does or what Nodeware does, and you try to sell them like you're trying to sell a Toyota, they don't care. They don't even understand why you're having a business conversation and not a technical one. So at the end of the day, you're not. You're making it a part of your security stack, and you're providing this as an extra layer of security.
Matt, I am impressed with the on-the-fly presentation skills.
I'm not as quick on the draw as I wanted to be, but
pretty quick on the draw.
Every MSP should look at this diagram, right? Threat is the bad thing, right? Exploit is the tool that they use to get through a vulnerability, and then the assets are the things we're trying to protect. And of course, as we mentioned earlier, like the first asset they come in on is not necessarily where the jewels are, right? So the only way to stop this, guys, is to find the vulnerabilities so you can stop the lightning bolt, because you have no control over the threat actors, right? And assets are what they are. Like there's no such thing as a clean network, right? You just have to do your best of trying to clean it as well as you can, and the only way to do that is to search specifically for known vulnerabilities.
Right, and not be scared, because that's the other thing. We talked about fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I find when an MSP runs any kind of vulnerability scan for the first time and all of it comes back, they're like, holy crap, I don't want to offer this because it's going to show them doing a crappy job, or there's so much of this. How do I tell them that I have to fix all of this? Well, again, the reality is you have to know what you don't know, or you're taking on the risk. Period. You're putting your business at risk. And second of all, break it down. Just break it down into bite-sized chunks. Start with the criticals and then keep moving your way down, because something is better than nothing, right? My wife's a lawyer and I forget what the term is, but it's called any man. And basically what that means, if a framework auditor or insurance company comes to you, the question they ask is, would anybody think this was a reasonable effort that is being made to protect the customer? If so,
and reasonable changes every year, right? Because it's both factors in the threat space, right? Mm-hmm. But also, what is everyone else doing, right? So if your competitors have learned to do this new thing, and you're maybe doing like the cheap or easy version of it, and you really need to be doing the better version of it, that matters. So with that, I've got a special guest down here, guys. So just give me a second here. So let's put Brian up on the big screen here.
Hey, you guys, Brian, like my intro song?
Oh yeah.
You know what's fantastic? I'm wearing the same shirt as that headshot.
I just want to know where you
consistency is key.
You know, it's called building a brand.
I was going to say, Matt said you were down there. Where did you crawl out from? That's what I want.
How many of those shirts do you own? That's what I want to know.
Well, a number where you wouldn't hear it and go, well, that's reasonable.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm here. Glad to be here.
So
We're glad to have you.
we brought you in out of the green room at this time because we haven't really, and I don't know if you guys can hear the train, but we haven't really talked about. Okay, we talked about the cost equation here and why we need to do this thing, right? Why this like belongs in the MSP ecosystem and how to maybe like size the costs with the customers, but like. The people that aren't doing it right now, right? It's probably because they haven't figured out how to make money doing it, right? So, there's your cue.
Right. Well, for starters, since we're on a little bit of delay, I'm going to kick this prompt out to the people watching. If you're sitting here asking, if you have a sales question, like how do I sell this? Or what do I say when a client says this? Put it in the chat and put me on the spot and see if you can stump me. And I'd love to just help. I'm listening to all of this. It's fantastic. A lot of really good things I wrote down that I want to reference that y'all were talking about. So you said something, Matthew, great to meet you, by the way. You said you can't sell Fort Mesa the way you'd sell a Toyota. Like you can't go to an end user and go, let me explain Fort Mesa to you. And then when I'm done explaining it, you're going to go, great, please give it to me. And you said they don't care and they won't understand it. It's absolutely true, except we have to sell Fort Mesa. But how do you sell Fort Mesa? I'm using Fort Mesa as an amalgam. How do you sell cybersecurity controls to somebody who does not care, does not want to understand, does not need, like, you need to sell Nodeware, but they go, I don't know what that means, but also don't tell me, right?
Well, you sell the I guess the solution, for lack of a better term, right? You're selling the fact that, like with us, what I always tell an MSP is the thing you should tell them is you now have continuous vulnerability scanning in your stack. From a business standpoint, what that means to you is I get to things sooner before they can become a problem versus regular everyday vulnerability scanning. Boom.
Right.
My thing's always been, don't go in there saying, hey, I've got Nodeware.
Right.
And
they don't care. I call it sausage making. You don't sell cyber by making sausage. You don't sell sausage by showing them the sausage plant. You sell
the farm,
sausage.
you mean?
You right. You don't say, okay, I have great news for you. We're an industry-leading sausage provider. So first I go to a butcher. They take all the pigs that they didn't want and I buy them. I put it in a blender. Then I add garlic. You don't tell them what's in it. You ask them, are you hungry? Right? You sell the outcome, not the process. So you don't sell a Toyota, for example, by saying, now listen, what's great about this model is it's got the best alternator. Well, let me go back. Let me explain how we convert heat energy back into electrical energy. Like, you sell a Toyota by saying, where are you headed? Where do you work? How far is it from your house? What time do you have to go? What a nightmare. Would you rather be comfier or better gas mileage or somewhere in the middle? Okay, well, I've got two options for you. Which one do you want? Which color do you want? You start by what do they need, and then you backfill the need with the outcomes of the product. So vulnerability scanning is one important piece. Of course, vulnerability management, rather, is an important piece of our stack. But you don't sell a Toyota by giving them a list of every part in a Toyota and saying, why don't you give that a read and let me know if you have any questions.
Exactly.
So you're right. So people have been selling vulnerability scanning for decades, actually, but only a very informed customer is going to ask for it. And even the ones that think they're informed, they may, because they're not technologists, right? They may ask you for a thing that maybe is not exactly what they need. Like there's different types of vulnerability scanning, right? There's different depth, there's different amount of effort. There's with people, without people, et cetera, right? So I've seen it successfully, vulnerability management with an SLA, with people doing the thing where MSPs are making $10, $20 per unit, per user, per device, per month, right? They're able to do this by either bundling it in with an advanced security offering, like an upgrade offer, right? Or selling it as a vulnerability management, not a product, right? Service, right?
Uh-huh.
Where they're saying, I'm actually going to do the thing. I'm going to find the problems, and then I'm going to actually make you safe, customer. And I guarantee it. Here's the SLA, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you get to agree on that with the customer, which is a cool part of the deal. Like, you get to as an MSP, go within your team and say, well, what are we going to be able to provide best? And then you get to go out to the customers and say, hey, this is what we provide best. Do you want this, this, and this, or this, and this? What are you looking for? It's meant to be a conversation. And if you feel like in the sale process, you're not having a conversation with your clients and potential clients, there's a rub there that I think could probably be solved.
Yeah, there's totally agree. It should be a conversation. If it's not a conversation, then I'm guessing you are always selling the silver, the good stack, and then later trying to squeeze them back into the better stack. And that's the sign that that's happening, or the evidence that that you're not having conversations and it's not an open dialogue, is that you can only ever sell the bottom tier. So my big advice for, like, again, I always come into these conversations like, you guys are super, super smart, but if we can't sell it, this is literally of no value to us. So we have to be able to sell it, but we're not going to sell a pile of parts. We're going to sell an outcome.
Hey,
Here's
Brian.
my big, go ahead.
No. I was going to say, one of the things that I always teach, and tell me whether you agree or disagree, is I tell that, MSPs, you need to have your MSP offering, the normal everyday stuff that you're competing with someone else with. And then you need to have your advanced security stack. And that advanced security stack is your normal everyday. You must take this, whether you explain it to them specifically or not, right? So you're showing them that I got this, and that's where you can compare pricing if you need to, and I haven't done a good job. But here's a security package I'm giving you. And you can give some basic details like we just said about outcomes, but they don't get a silver, gold, or platinum. You get my security package because I know what's in there. You must have at a minimum. And if you don't, then I can't really do business with you. Then to your point, fine, everybody doesn't need SOC. Everybody doesn't need SIEM. Those can be the evil add-ons, so to speak.
Right. I mean, my big thing with selling cyber is, like, I've always been more of a fan of giving them one proposal, which you've built what I call a narrative tunnel to. So it's like, we figure out exactly what all their pains are and needs are, and then we give them what feels like exactly what they asked for, rather than saying, you want to be secure or really secure or super, super, super secure? Because that makes it look like, wait a minute, is secure really secure? And why are you calling it secure? Like, I'm either secure or I'm not, right? Because that's how, of course, that's how they think of it. So what I would do is I would preface the conversation like this. And you need to use analogies when you're selling complicated products. Use an analogy. And I'm gonna make, I haven't really even thought this one through, but I would use some version of, like, imagine
We're
your
seeing the
cybersecurity.
sausage made right here with the analogies.
Yeah,
I'm
imagine
looking
you're
forward to it.
imagine you're doing cybersecurity controls. Imagine them like the security for your physical security for your office building. You've got cameras, you've got access control, you've got locks on your doors, you've got motion sensors, you've got motion lights. These are all controls. These are things that all are contributing to the security of your building. Now, imagine like a vulnerability or a threat actor might be in your network for 200 days. So what are security cameras going to do? It's going to slow down or extend the time it takes for a threat actor, for a prowler, to make a full 360 and look for access points into your building. Because he's got to bob and weave Mission Impossible style through your camera zones. But he's going to find your blind spots. So if we do a true, like, vulnerability scan, it's like we send out a heat pulse and we're looking for all heat signatures around your building once every 90 days.
I really want to watch a heist movie right now, guys. Like,
Right?
Yeah.
You say, listen, go watch Mission Impossible and then Point Break and then come into this with me.
Yeah.
But a vulnerability threat, right? Vulnerability management versus just doing like a vulnerability scan once a quarter says, every day we have this little pulsing thing that will tell us a heat signature. It's going to make it easier to find the people who are bobbing and weaving through the rest of our controls. So now you bring it all the way back to the customer and you transfer all the pressure to determine the value of their cybersecurity stack back to them. So you say, I always say IT is a spectrum. There's cost on one side and risk on the other side. Where do you want to be? Because if you give me $1 million a day, I guarantee you will not have any vulnerabilities, because I will stand over your shoulder and say, don't click that. No, don't click that. Stop it. I'll pay if you pay me, I can do that. If you pay me $50 a month, I'm going to install some passive agents and we're going to hope for the best. So look at the security system on a jewelry store versus a pawn shop, right? Because the value of what they're protecting is different. So the proportionate measures need to be taken for what's inside, right? So the question, Mr. Customer, is how valuable is your business? And I mean that, and I don't mean that like,
well, and your data
Yeah.
and you know, the different elements, right? The different elements that are vulnerable, because some of it might be, go ahead, Matt.
Well, so I just to back up here a little bit, right? We're talking about
Sure.
Brian's given us the good, better, best, like montage, and I believe in good, better, best. Okay, but so vulnerability management, just to be clear, you can have good vulnerability management, better vulnerability management, and best vulnerability management, right?
Sure.
And you should, right? Like the good one is like we install the thing and we have the report if someone asks for it, but we don't read the thing, we don't fix the thing, right? And maybe you decide not to put that in a good package. And here's why. You might want your customer that is driven to get the report to not accept the report as the outcome, right?
Yeah.
You might want to tell them, look, you can have the report, but only if I'm fixing the thing, right? And so I think that depending on your market segment, right, and your sales process, you might have a basic scan or you might not have a basic scan. My opinion, even in your most basic version of vulnerability management, which I think every customer should have, you're doing some people stuff, right? Like you're doing some people stuff that you're making good gross margins on, right? Like ideally you're making 30, 50, maybe 60% gross margins on your vulnerability management service. And it's because you're looking at the things that like, so we use a scoring system that where we look at like the likelihood that a vulnerability is going to be utilized, exploited in the wild in the next 30 days, right? And if something's at like a 90% chance that this is going to be exploited in the next 30 days, like that goes into the good tier, right? Like the 50% maybe is like the better tier. The like, okay, if there's a 2% chance this is going to be exploited in the wild, that's like the best tier, right? And so that's how you should be selling vulnerability management at these levels. And you know, the type of guidance I use with clients is not just like explaining different levels of security, which is really important because sometimes people think of something as secure or not secure, and it's really there's a lot going on there, right? There's different, but ask the customer what the business outcome is that they expect, right? And this does depend on their vertical and how big they are and stuff, but the basics are, hey, at level 1, right? Good. We're going to guarantee that if an attacker breaks in and wipes all your data out, we can restore you from a backup. Don't worry about someone that's ransoming that you're going to be locked out of your systems and your business is going to be dead. Like we'll just come in, we'll wipe the things, we'll restore from a backup. That's level 1. Level 2 is, well, this data, like we don't want it leaked out onto the internet. Like we're worried that someone could ransom us, right? And that data could leak and that would kill the company or expose us to liability, right? And then the level 3 is like, actually, the government's going to come get us if we don't do the thing, right? That like human safety might be in play, right? You might be a defense contractor, right? You know, air safety, healthcare, right? These are places that there's regulatory requirements, right? Financial services, and you have to have that best tier, or you're not doing best practices. Right. And we're starting to see some hints of it. I've seen prosecutions abroad. We're seeing some hints that they're going to come here stateside. I've seen a few cases, but guys, being bad at security is now a prosecutorial risk, right? You can go to jail for being bad at security.
Well, they're coming after CISOs now.
Yeah.
Directly. They're coming after CISOs that they feel are negligent in what they were supposed to be doing, kind of like what we talked about earlier. But you know what's funny? Even as you talk about good, better, best, I would say, based on my readings and research, the insurance companies and the compliance frameworks are now absolutely requiring at least better. Right. You know, they're not requiring low, that's too little. They're not necessarily really requiring best, because that's extreme. That's you doing something every day to manage that. But if you're not in that better category, then you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Isn't
Well,
the-
and
Isn't a window of expectations now, Matt, 2 weeks on certain vulnerabilities? And I'm
this,
probably
the standards, depending on which standard you look at and which baseline, almost universally across the board, cybersecurity standards that all the regulators reference as like this is what you're supposed to be doing. They say you need to find a vulnerability if it's findable, decide what to do about it, make a risk decision, and then do the thing, which might be nothing, we accept the risk, but it needs to be informed, or it might be something, we eliminated the problem. And it has to be within between 14 and 30 days, and 14 is more common than 30 days. There's a few that I've seen 30. Most of them are leaning towards 14 as the SLA period on. And so if you think about the timeline, right, for you to do all those things, find the thing, rate it, right, make a decision about it, like remediate, like manage the problem, like the only way, and then you've got weekends in the way, right? Like, so the only way that's going to happen is if you're scanning every day, right?
Yeah.
and God forbid the data changes over the course of 2 weeks.
And that happens, yeah.
And that's why the continuous vulnerability scanning is so important, because you know what? Here's the reality. You're showing, right, with us or anybody else out there that's doing continuous vulnerability scanning, the stuff is coming back and saying critical. It's not more than 24 hours old. So if you're at least making those decisions, let's say twice a week, right, when the criticals pop up, then you're going to get well under that. You're going to stay on top of it. And you're going to make sure, at least to the best of your ability that anybody would consider reasonable, that problem isn't going to become a bigger problem.
Yep.
So we're talking about the technical parts of vulnerability management, the how, the why, the what is it, the maybe how you should package and sell, why your customers should buy it. But you guys want to do plugs?
I tried plugs. It didn't grow anything back.
Oh man, that was quick. I like that. I think he gets to go first because of the quickness.
Sorry, couldn't resist. Brian over there has great hair, you know.
Oh
Thank
yeah.
you.
So Nodeware is a continuous vulnerability scanning tool. Runs 7x24 in the background, no network degradation. Sensors and agents to capture the entire infrastructure wherever your assets may be. And what's really cool is, compared to other products out there, you work off a multi-tenant dashboard, not a stack of reports. It's platform agnostic. It gives you that complete asset inventory on anything that's got an IP, so you can decide what to do with it. It highlights critical high, mediums, and lows for you. You can connect it to your ticketing system. And at the end of the day, if it takes you more than 30 minutes to roll it out to almost any size customer, you did something wrong and you need to come back and do another onboarding session.
That's fast.
It is.
How did you guys get it that fast? Is that proprietary?
That is proprietary, but all I'll say is, like any good product, it was something that was brought out because of ourselves and the other side of the business. And then boom, we started building it, finding other people really liked it, and continued to grow. And
How long
honestly,
have you been with Nodeware now? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's fine. I've been there since January.
And the first time we spoke, you were very excited. Why are you so excited about Nodeware personally?
Personally, I believe in the product like there's no tomorrow. I'm one of those that believes, at this point in my career, I don't want to sell anything. I want to be so excited about it and so infectious about it that people go, oh my God, I got to buy this. Even if I'm discussing it, I'm not saying you don't talk to them about anything.
Sure.
And the product is incredible. I believe in where this is going within the industry. And I really think the company's fantastic and has a lot of room for growth. I mean, continuous vulnerability scanning, there's only a couple out there that really deal specifically in the MSP market. There are some enterprise tools, but they're way more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So I just see so much green space and so much opportunity to grow and help MSPs become better. And as it says in my profile, one of my biggest things is, first and foremost, I'm an MSP evangelist. If that means me walking you over to a competitor to make sure you're taken care of, that's what I'll do. If you need help selling stuff, I'll help you sell stuff. It's a huge industry, small community, and we're all in it together.
And that's actually, I'm glad you said that, because that was one of the reasons we were so excited to have you on, is we take that same approach with our partners, and you're an amazing voice for it. So we're really glad to have you. Thank you for coming on and talking about Nodeware and vulnerability management. Brian, do your thing, man.
Yeah, first I'm going to throw another compliment towards Nodeware. It's how refreshing it is to find a vendor. I hope I don't regret saying this, but seeing a vendor who's so not a software that's so not overtly just created, tooled for acquisition, like, but you're actually like trying to make it easier to run an MSSP. Yep. Instead of just like, we invented one new feature and now let's just sell enough of it to get absorbed. But like, you're actually helping. There's so many vendors that you're like, wait, this is all you do? Like, I don't get it, because you know what I'm saying? So anyway, it's refreshing to see a product that's like, oh yeah, there's still people who are like making really kick-ass products who are trying to keep MSSPs, CISOs from going to jail or paying.
Yeah, there's still people who care, you know?
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Anyway, I just want to throw that out. Yeah. I have a company called Feel Good MSP. So I run a sales accelerator helping MSPs and MSSPs create end-to-end sales processes with the end goal of a net new MRR client every month. And I run a 3-day workshop for $50 every month. The next one, we just finished this one this week. We have one, registration's already open for August, where I just go through like the whole framework of how I scaled the $2 million MSP in 3 years. So that's sort of what I do.
I mean, and Brian, to your point, I love what you do. I mean, I really do, because it's so important out there. And all I'll say is there's a bunch of people that claim to do these kind of things. I've got one or two that I really respect, but there are a lot of people, they take a lot of money and they don't produce results. And
right.
It absolutely sucks. So right back at you. I love someone that cares, is focused on the MSP, and actually wants to see them succeed, and not just wants to see them give them money.
Yeah. Right. Thanks.
I put you guys next to each other so you can hug.
Thank you. So we high five.
All right, Matt, talk about Fort Mesa a little bit.
So Zach and I are at Fort Mesa. We're in cyber risk management, and it's like, what does that mean? So MSPs need to explain to their customers. They need to inform their customers why they should invest in security, how they should invest in security, what they should buy. And we're not selling a QBR product. It is a cybersecurity compliance product, but we're really passionate about bringing that down into the sale and informing the customer. So we do that. And we also drive both through features. We've got vulnerability management workflows in our product. We work with a number of vulnerability sources. We work through a number of compliance frameworks, NIST, CMMC, DFARS, FedRAMP, a number of international standards, and we help MSPs all over the world sell the right security to each of their customers, and then we help them prove it. And we've got some project management capabilities to keep track of like literally thousands of tasks across your customers that all need to be orchestrated. So that's us. It's exciting to get Nodeware here on the call. Brian, always good to have you back. Do you guys have any like last thoughts, vulnerability management? How do we get all of our watchers to do more of this and make money doing it?
My last thoughts are do it. Do something. do something, even if it's wrong. Now, you need to do it, and you need to find a product that works best for you, whether that's us or somebody else. But I will suggest that continuous is the way to go. It's the way things are moving right now. Our pricing is made for MSPs. Our platform is made for MSPs. So, I mean, reach out. And even if it's not our product, let's talk vulnerability management. Let's talk why it's important. And as I said earlier, look, if I need to walk you over to one of my competitors because we're not the right fit, okay. I just want to take care of you and make sure that you've got what you need. Because if you're not doing this, I'm telling you right now, someone's going to come in and take your client. And I hate that.
Well, only the good ones. They're only going to take the good clients.
True.
Right.
Ones you care about.
The ones who will pay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're an MSP or MSSP, you're listening on this call and you're like, okay, cool. Another great tool. It seems like it's good. Can I use it? How do I sell it? How do I keep making money on cyber? I don't know how to charge enough for cyber. I mean, if I'm in the MSSP or MSP space right now, hey, Brad, good to see you. I highly recommend, look, we're in this like space race in cyber. Like you just said, now there's a Department of Justice for the compliance and ethics people. And if you have a compliance and ethics violation, you can go to jail and pay millions of dollars because you accidentally were technically have slaves because of the way a contract was written. And, you know, some people might be upset that the regulations are increasing, but they should. Because how many people out here can just walk into a trade show with a credit card and leave an MSSP because they bought a bunch of tools? Businesses should not be able to accidentally trust people like that. Like, we should be freaking regulated because this is serious stuff. Agreed? Absolutely. So you've got to be able to charge what you need to charge, and you have to sell what the clients need you to sell them. So figure out how to couch it, contextualize it into a metaphor, into an analogy. Show them, look, your security is like your body's health. The minimum level would be, I give you really bad bronze level health insurance with a huge out-of-pocket maximum. And this way, if you get hit by a truck, you aren't bankrupt. But you still get hit by a truck. The next tier is, we start giving you some vitamins and supplements and being proactive with your health. Or depending on and how important your health is, I'm going to hire you a personal trainer and a dietitian who's going to make sure that you're not just not dying, but you're getting healthier. And that's the purpose of things like continuous vulnerability management. Like, we're going to find all these things. We're going to find 10,000 problems at the beginning. Just accept it. We know it. You know it. We can't possibly solve them all in 30 days. Cybersecurity is a journey. We got to get 1% better every day. The only way to do that is by having the right tools, buying the right tools, and helping the customers understand that investing into these tools is literally investing into the future and sustainability of their business.
And I'll say one more thing that I think you'll agree with, Brian. Stop being scared. Stop being scared to increase your price, to create the right stack, to go tell people why you're worth it. Stop being scared. You're the expert. You're the people providing them the right services. Stop being scared to have those important conversations with your customers. Because again, and I hate to sound doom and gloom, if you're not having them, someone else is going to have them, even though you're perfectly capable of taking care of your customer. Speak.
Yeah.
I love that. Absolutely.
All right, guys. It's Friday. You're sitting between me and a tequila, I think.
Well, awesome.
Great.
We ready to wrap, and we'll post here on the comments thread some information. Sound good?
Cool.
All right.
That's good.
Thank you guys for joining another Fort Mesa Roundtable. Happy Friday.
You too.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys. Thanks for coming on.